So welcome back to another video. Today I'm just going to be going through some of the different techniques that I use to clean up some of my prints and salvage some of the damaged prints. So sometimes where you'd perhaps normally reprint, hopefully with some of the techniques that I show you today you'll be able to salvage some of those prints. First off, I just wanted to apologise that it's taken so long to upload content at the moment. It's not that I've been lazy, I've actually, for about the last 2 months I've had a problem with DaVinci Resolve. I used to use the free version. I've never had a problem, but for some reason everything that I try and edit has an audio sync problem. No settings have been changed, it's just I don't know what's causing it. You may have noticed it in the SPB review. It doesn't start off with a problem, it sort of creeps in at the end. So when I drop in the footage and start making cuts at the start of the video, the audio delay starts to creep in at the end, and by the time you've sort of worked your way 3/4 of the length through the video, the audio sync has caught up to about the halfway point. So that's why it was so heavily edited, and I had to chop out a lot of the talking and stuff and mask a lot of stuff with pictures. I was hoping it was just a one-off, like maybe there was something wrong with the file or the camera settings, but no. When I edited Blog Part 2, it had the same problem. I've actually spent 10 hours editing that footage, so I've edited it twice, and in the end I just again ended up really heavily editing it. I'm still going to publish it. I've uploaded it, I just haven't published it yet. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention at the beginning of this video, if there's an audio sync problem, that's why. I have just purchased the full version of DaVinci Resolve, which I'm told supports more MP4 codecs and stuff, so hopefully that will have fixed the problem. If there's no audio synchronization problems in this video, then you'll know that it has. But if there's still synchronization problems, then any input would be appreciated, because I've ran out of things to try. So yeah, that's why I've not been painting any models and stuff, because I didn't want to start recording any more footage and then find out I've got to switch software or something like that. So yeah. I'm also testing out a new camera lens today, so you may notice that it's not jumping in and out like it was before, and we can zoom in really well. This is actually a very this lens. Actually, the lens costs probably as much as the camera. And this is an actual movie lens. So it's a 18 to 50 millimeter Sigma video lens. So I'll just bring in. I'm going to be doing a head transplant. So as you can see, the supports failed on this head, and it's got some like weird, I don't know what they are, bits that hang down. They failed. So normally you just reprint all of this again, but you know, if we can transplant the head, then that's going to save the print. Yeah. So I'm going to chop this head off. I'm going to put this head on. And another example of a transplant would be this gremlin hand. So this hand failed, so all of these fingers were missing. So I reprinted a second hand, and then I used the Dremel and a grinding point. So I drew around it with a pen on both hands, and then I just cut through a really fine line, just followed it around, took off the old hand, put on the new one. I made sure that I filled a little bit of the hand with some Miller pot. I didn't fill the whole hand, just a little bit, to build like a little dam, similar to this. And then I poured epoxy resin down one of those holes, just enough to fill up past the join line and make it stop. But to print another one of those would have taken 26 hours or something like that. It won't fit on the Jupiter, so I had to do it on the Mega 8K, and it's a kind of a slow printer. So yeah, so I'll just show you these tools quickly. I'm not going to be using these today. They do create quite a bit of dust, so I'd recommend using them outside and wear a respirator. But they're just normal grinding tips from Amazon. I think they're about £8 or something like that. But they're really, really handy because if you try and drill resin as well, it splinters and shatters unless you're using the specialist resins. These will just bore straight through resin, no problem. So I'm just going to take this one out because I'm going to be using some sanding tips today. So I'm not going to be using these just yet, but I just figured I'd show you them now. So these are the sanding tips that I've been using to clean up support areas and stuff and get rid of defects. Much more effective than sandpaper because they don't leave big scratches, and yeah, it's just like material type stuff. I'll show you these in a bit. I'm just going to load up the green. The different colours for different grits. They're actually used for polishing metal and stuff. These are what I use to polish up my casts. So before I chop off his head, I'm just going to show you some of the things I'm going to be doing afterwards. Like I say, we're going to be sealing up his head with some epoxy resin, so I'll be turning him upside down and pouring it either through one of these holes or through this hole on the front. But I'm also going to be filling up his legs with a mixture of epoxy resin and sand. And what that's going to do is give the model weight, so that when he's all built together and he stands on the base, there's a bit more weight to the model. I've already done the same to the base. I do that to most of my models now, just because I don't have to worry about falling over or getting knocked over. Like, I'll just show you Gollum. So this was the original Gollum, and he's already falling over. So, yeah, things like large gremlins, they don't want to stand up. That's why I have to build like perspex bases. So I'll get a sheet of perspex, I'll cut a shape out around his feet, and then I'll Dremel that out, and then I'll glue his feet to that. But if you use a mixture of sand, stones and epoxy resin, I'm not going to do it with that one because his head's balanced on. This table's a bit of a mess, I'll show you a picture. So yeah, so you do that by filling up the base with some stones and epoxy resin. So you put in some pea gravel, just pour a load of pea gravel in there, then mix up some sand and epoxy resin, pour that in there, seal over the bottom with some of this cheap tape, this cheap fragile tape. Sellotape doesn't work, brown box tape doesn't work, gaffer tape doesn't work. They all leak and it makes a right mess. But this stuff is the type of tape where you pull it off and it leaves bits behind, so it really does stick well. Seal it over and then just turn the model back upright and then just leave it to dry, and that's it. You've now got a nice heavy model. And because you pour in the resin in, it coats the inside of the model as well, which also gives it a lot more strength. I'll just seal up his feet before I chop his head off. So in order to make sure that his feet, the epoxy doesn't leak out of his feet, we're going to be filling the hole with some of this light curing putty from Frozen. You can get it from Green Stuff World. It works out about the same in price. It's good stuff, but it's also not good stuff. So when you cure it, if you cure it properly, it sets like cement, and when you're sanding it down, it's like trying to sand down epoxy resin. It's really, really tough. So if you had like a bit of a lump sticking out of here, you used to try and sand it down. Normally by the time you've sanded down this stuff, you've sort of sanded down the area around it as well. So you end up flattening out some of the details. So I don't use it as often as other people, to me, I only use this sort of stuff when I know that I can't fill the hole with Milliput. So if I was to try and shove some Milliput over this hole, it will just fall through. Even if you scrape it to one side, it will still end up, you know, you end up with sort of partially filling it, and you end up having to wait while it dries and then pack it in a bit more, or you end up having to pack up enough of the boot that you can fill it up and seal it off, which is what I've done with the front. So to stop the epoxy resin from coming out the hole that I added here, I've used Milliput, and I literally just had to keep whacking it in until it's filled up the whole front of this boot. So obviously this sort of stuff, as I'll show you, is kind of handy, but the reason why I don't like it is because if you squeeze too much of it over this hole, some of it will go over the edge, and then if it doesn't cure properly, then it turns to liquid like normal resin when it's trapped inside a print, and it'll basically just dissolve the print, and yeah, you end up with a mess. So I'm using it very lightly. So that's a fairly good application. So this is the frozen cure beam. You actually get two of these little wand things. It's got a timer on, so you can have it on for 1 minute, 10 minutes, or permanently. I'm going to cover that over. This is channel 1. So yeah. It's much more powerful than just a torch. I'm just going to cure this for 10 to 15 seconds. You'll see the fumes coming off it. I'm just going to really hold that against it, because I know that some of it's gone over. And if this was a darker resin and the light wasn't able to sort of pass through it, like I say, I've had it where it's dissolved inside and it's made a right mess. I also used it to fill, so that's plenty of time. I'm still going to put tape over the bottom of these anyway, but yeah, I also used it to fill some holes on William on the new Underworld project that I'm working on, and yeah, like I say, it dissolved his foot. I had to rebuild it out of Milliput and epoxy resin. Did a good job, but still, it was like jello, like a snot ball inside the bottom of his foot, just melting away. While I've got this out, I'll just fill these holes here as well. Just going to use a damp floor wipe to wipe off any excess. It doesn't need to be perfect, because I'll still go over this with some Milliput later on. I should be wearing glasses for this, but I'll put those on in a minute when I use the proper my proper curing light. I use 100-watt floodlight. So yeah, so that's the frozen cure beam. I've just filled this second one off camera just to speed things up a bit. And the light curing putty. So like I say, it's very handy, but I don't rely on it all that much. I tend to prefer Milliput. Just move this out of the way for now. So I'm going to chop his head off. And I'm going to use my Tamiya craft. Oh, I'm not sure what this is. It's kind of like one of those Japanese saws. You get a couple of different fittings for it, but they're extremely flexible. So I normally just use this one. Once you start cutting, it's very accurate. It's not like one of those. It's not like a hacksaw where the blade can twist and you start going off. So once you line it up, straight through. So I'm going to zoom this in a little bit. So yeah, I'm going to start cutting. I love this. Just going to use a damp cloth, floor wipe. That's a nice cut actually. Very nice. And that's going to line up beautiful. So, on to the next bit, super glue. So, super glue can be really annoying to get into tight places, tight little gaps. So I bought these from Amazon. And you just slot this onto the super glue. And now you can, don't want to squeeze too hard. And you can start to see the glue going down. It's almost like a syringe at the end. In fact, to make sure this sticks quickly, I'm just going to put the glue directly onto the model. Spray some activator on here. that is a successful head transplant. Oh, keep bashing into the cap. So I'm just going to use the applicator to fill in any little gaps. Leave that there. I'm just going to leave that to sit for a minute, and the glue will just go back down into the bottle. So in a few minutes I will fill that little gap with some resin or something. We'll move on to the next bit. In fact, before we move on to the sanding, we are going to be using a cheap disposable airbrush. Well, I say cheap, this is the elite version. So. We're going to need some high-speed resin and some ABS resin. So we've got a really fluid water resin and a thicker, more loopier resin. And for this first part, I'm going to use the thicker resin. So I normally just use what's in the lid. So tilt that on one side. So I've brought back the cure beam, and I'm going to quickly fill that hole and cure it. Quick with this, I don't want that big blob to go anywhere else. There we go, love that. Just don't want to give it a chance to drip down inside. Once we've got a seal, it's fine. I'm just going to add a little bit more to this side. I'm just going to try and blend that up into his neck. Now I just need to fill the rest of that big hole. I'm just going to do it a little bit at a time. And I think that will be passable. You won't be able to see that once it's painted. There's also a bubble to go on his head as well. Clean up inside his mouth, because where we've removed a lot of the supports, it's a bit rough. So we'll just paint over everything inside his mouth. Get right down the back of his tongue. Like that. absolutely lovely. It's lovely and clean. And before I'm going to move this guy out of the way for a minute. So I'm just going to bring in this one. So this is a print that, this is so heavy now. So this has got a couple of defects on it. So this side I've already started to clean up. This is the side that I'm going to be doing today. But we need some of this thick resin just to fill this little hole here. You can try and blend that in, but it's going to look crap. So that should be okay for that bit. Maybe not. See, all this excess has to be sanded away, so it's just a pain in the arse. So, running around her eyes, just here, is a tiny little bit of layer separation. Look like little paper cuts. And they run across here, and they run down here. And they're almost invisible until you change the angle slightly, and you can see that running through here. I'm going to mask that by filling the gap on each one of these. I can't do more than one or two at a time. Cotton bud. So I'm just using the light to see how bad the line is. There's also one running across her chin here. I'm not going to paint over those just yet, and then we're just going to fill these up with epoxy resin, fill his head up with epoxy resin, or rather his neck. So now I'm just filling up the feet, just to save a little bit of time. I've poured a little bit in this one, now I'm going to pour some in this one. I was trying to use the hole at the top, but this one doesn't like it. So let's just pour real slow. Oh, too fast. So now I'm going to sit these on the windowsill, and if anyone's wondering, I did wipe around with a little bit of IPA to remove any of the resin. So whilst they are curing, I'm going to move on to sanding. So like I said at the beginning, these are sanding tips for metal and stuff like that, but I'm going to use them for so just before I do that, actually, respirator. Make sure you're wearing a respirator because of the resin dust. I'm also going to turn on it. that's my new sanding technique. And obviously, like I say, these are different grits, so this is the softest one. This one's a little bit tougher than this one, and then this is the next one up. So sort of black, red, green, or black, green, red, whichever it is. But I find it a lot less abrasive than trying to go in there with sandpaper and sort of rubbing over a larger area where you sort of end up rubbing away other areas as well. You can still come in and finish off with a bit of sandpaper, but hopefully this next trick will solve all our problems. So we're going to go to a cheap airbrush. And yes, you can hear a whistling noise, and that is my compressor tank, which I need to shut off the compressor and tighten up the valve, which I might actually do in just a moment. Actually, it's bugging me. So I just got this from Amazon. I think it's about £20. And it's a 0.5. Turn it down to 20 psi, and now we're going to switch to the high-speed resin. I need another pipette thing. Oof, that's a lot. Just going to put my respirator back on. I think I might need to up the PSI to 30 PSI and test it on this guy. I'm going to cure this with my wheel light. Might want to cover your eyes, Doc. You can see this shit from space. So it's actually added like a skin texture. So skin had a texture before, but when I was cleaning up certain areas, you sort of smoothed it all out. But you can actually see where it's sort of puddled up around those areas.
is working very nice. Very nice. So there's a line running around his neck, that's fine. It's still a bit greasy somewhere. Something needs to be. The bit's not cured properly. So I'm actually happy with those results, so I am now going to turn to the lip and zoom in. You can already see how nice and smooth that is. Now I'm going to do all the supports under here. I'm really soft. A much quicker way of doing getting rid of the support holes. Because it's the underside anyway, so it wouldn't really be seen. I'm just going to leave that running. Get that line around the face. This is risky. Something just interrupted my screen capture there.
Sorry about the jump cut there. As you can see, I've had a little bit of tidy up and a change of scenery. I actually forgot to press record again, but you didn't really miss much. I left the little bit with the gremlin's arse in, just to show you what you missed. So after I'd finished curing her eyes, I had quite a lot of resin left in the cup, and I didn't want to pour it back into the bottle. So what I did was I quickly sprayed a heavy layer on the back here, and I carried it around all the way around to the front, but where it sprayed between her breasts, it sort of puddled a little bit, so it's made like it's like puddled together, so it's a bit too rough here. So I think I may have screwed this one up. It also caught her cheeks as well, so it just sprayed straight up the middle of the model. But yeah, so I put her to one side. I still had a little bit left, so I sprayed it on the gremlin's arse, because that was the worst area, where all the super glue had leaked out the side of his legs and had flowed down between all the grooves and stuff. I'd got rid of most of it with some super glue remover, but it was still very, very rough and not very good. So what I hadn't realised, which is my own fault, while I was working on these models, just everything that was being poured into the extractor was landing on the filter, and as I'm flicking around with that cure beam, plus the sunlight coming in through the window, it cured it onto the filter. It didn't stop the filter from working, but it definitely impeded it, so the flow wasn't as good. Then Amazon knocked at the door, so I had to pause the video, and when I come back, like I said, I forgot to unpause it, and I just sort of heavily sprayed some onto the back of her and the gremlin, and yeah, when I pulled my mask off, I got a massive whiff, and it really burnt my sinuses inside. The only way I can describe it is, though, like when I was a kid and you went to like the public swimming baths and the water was like 60% chlorine, if you got that up your nose, it made your made your sinuses and the back of your throat sore, and that could last a couple of days. It was like that, amplified by about 100. So very unpleasant. So after that, I decided I'm not going to spray inside. I'm just going to do it outside, and yeah, I was able to hone the technique down, and wow, like I say, it's an amazing technique, and I'm going to be using it all the time. I'm going to show you some of the prints and some of the effects you're able to create with it, and just how effective it is. But I did want to warn you, I don't recommend using it and doing it in the house. You want to do it outside, and you definitely want to wear a respirator. It's no more or less dangerous than like using enamel primers or solvent-based lacquers or anything like that. The only difference is the dust that the cloud that you get from this isn't like a dry powder that just smells bad. It's actually liquid resin. So like I say, do it outside, but other than that, absolutely fantastic. I'm going to show you some of the models and show you some of the before and after pictures, and then I'm going to move on to some other techniques. So Gollum turned out absolutely fantastic. You can see where it's added the skin texture. It's on its back as well. I'm not sure how well it will show up in this light, but it's really, really good. The only thing is, I actually forgot to spray underneath his chin. So when I gave him the first layer, I sprayed that on really heavily, so it was all nice and shiny. And that's because that's where all the supports were. And obviously, like I say, you can't then frost it. You have to spray it with some IPA, wipe away all that film, and then come back and frost him. Which is what I did, but I forgot to do the underside of his chin. And I didn't spray loads on the line here, so sprayed quite heavily and made it all shiny around his hair. So where the line cut straight around his throat and cut all the way through his hairline, that's all looking great. But when I looked, this side wasn't too bad, but like I say, this side here I could still see part of that line, and I couldn't be bothered to spray more resin again because I packed everything away. So I used another technique, which is to use some high density modelling paste and a little bit of water and a sponge. So I just used a piece of fake sea sponge, just put a blob of the modelling paste out, and I used a piece of wet sea sponge. So I wet it first, so if you squeezed it, you can squeeze out quite a bit of water. And I just sort of start to lightly stipple it. And because of the water inside the sponge, it's not enough to make it go all slimy, but it's enough to sort of take the edge off it, so it's not spiky. If you were to just take this stuff neat, raw, and stipple it, it will end up quite spiky, and that's not what we wanted to do. I just wanted to create a little bit of texture, mainly here to hide that line, or just to break it up a little bit so it doesn't look like a line. But then I sort of carried it on into a few other places just to blend it into the rest of the model. And as I was doing that, I was wetting it in a little bit of water all the time, so it became less and less dense. It's barely, you can barely feel it on some parts. So when I move on to the priming stage, we'll see how that one looks. This one, again, had lots and lots of layer lines. I'm not sure if it's going to show up, but it was basically I had to print this. The supports was on the bottom and running up the back here, and there was basically lines running all the way up here. Also, the supports failed on his, I'm not sure what these are, flaps of skin. So 2 of these was actually just flat, and I used UV resin, so I just put a blob of UV resin on there and cured it, and then sort of blended it in, and it's worked really well. You can't tell that they was flat. And the same on his arms. I was able to add a little bit of texture, and then I spray over him with the resin, and yeah, it's turned out really well. all the lines on his back are gone. His head's all nice, and you know, I can work with this, I can paint this. Whereas before I wouldn't have bothered with him. Mars attacks. I went a little over the top with the weathering effect, or corrosion. I knew that was going to happen. So because of the way that he has to be painted, I couldn't stick him together. But from the start of the video, like, he's really, really heavy. So the weight of his legs, he may tilt because he's not stuck to the bottom there properly. But once the tanks are on, because of the weight of his legs, it's sort of, and it's made him a lot more supported than what he was. And as you can see, I've added lots of corrosion to all of his joints and stuff. I'm putting up some pictures as well. But yeah, once I'd given him a coating of resin, everything looked nice and smooth and shiny. All the layer lines on the tanks was gone, same on his boots. Everything looked great. But this one came with like sort of a rust weather texture to it, but it wasn't very pronounced, and I thought it looked a bit crap. So I added my own texture afterwards, which I think looks loads better. I just got a little bit excited. I have, I was going to say I'm going to let go of him now, but I don't want to fall to bits. So there is a bubble to go on his head. I think I already said I'm going to be casting this out of epoxy resin. You can use that ultra clear resin from Anycubic, which is supposed to be like glass, but this is actually quite thick, and the amount of work that I plan to put into the details on his face, I really didn't want them distorted by cheaping out. So the idea was to print these off and cast them out of epoxy resin. Unfortunately, I forgot what size I scaled him to. Get this right. And it doesn't fit. One sec. Oh, maybe it does fit now. Oh, it does. So I just put it on the wrong way around. There you go. No. So I've scaled him at 290%, and I've printed these at 280%. So that extra little bit is just a little bit too tight. See here. So yeah, I need to sort that out, but that will be another video. To cast 2 of these once they're scaled up a little bit, so we'll find out. For the person that asked about the sanding, I'm going to show you that in a minute anyway, but yes, so whenever I've sanded a model, whenever I do any sanding, I always wipe it down with a floor wipe. So these are just a cheap, what do I do with them? So these are the ones I buy. I buy a stack of them, about 5 or 6 packs at a time. They're only £1. These are a bit dry now. Where's it? Yeah, that's a fresh one. So yeah, so whenever I've done any sanding, I always wipe down. And I do it repeatedly, so I would do this and then look for any defects, rub it down a little bit more, because you can see all the scratch marks from the sandpaper. This was before I started using the buffing pads. But yeah, you can see there, look, it still needed some more work. So yeah, a little bit of water, or rather a wet floor wipe, shows up the defects and lets you know what's what. It also keeps it nice and clean. Sometimes I'll run them under the tap, or sometimes I'll spray them with a little bit of water, and just to clear off any debris. I'll just bring in the gremlin because I know some of you are dying to see him. So I can't actually fit him in focus, and the camera's moved back as far as I can move it. It's
it's about 3/4 of a metre back, with an 18mm lens. Oh, it's set to 18mm. So yeah, as you can see, he's pretty darn big. But yeah, he is looking good. I mean, I'm really, really pleased with how well he's turned out. You know, you can't see any of the joins, so where I join his thumb on and his arm on, absolutely perfect. The joins around his legs and stuff, absolutely perfect. The cut lines that was around his chest, so there was a big line around here and multiple lines on his chest, the same on his shoulders and stuff, all of that gone. I can remove his head because I use some magnets to hold that on. Just trying to hold him into the light. So you can see on his on these horns and stuff, I sprayed those until they was really shiny. The same with his eyes. His ears, well, there was lines running through his ears, so his ears was printed vertically so that the supports was on the inside, so that I didn't have any supports to sand on this texture. Yeah, there's just a few lines here, they're all nicely gone. The same on the top and at the back, so there's really, really prominent here. You can see how I've lost some of the detail, but I was able to blend in that technique and match it on the other side so it looks totally natural. Yeah. I'll just turn him around. I'll put some pictures up as well. This is where I join his arms together, and I haven't actually sorted that out yet. He's really heavy. He weighs about 3 kilos because his legs are completely full of resin up to about here. But as you can see, his butt is his butt is perfect. All of that super glue was sprayed over. The same with all the defects up here, and we've added all that skin texture and stuff. Yeah, turned out really, really well. I'll just get rid of him now. So I've just quickly zoomed in a little bit for this one. So I love this model. I think it's a fantastic character. So I was actually really looking forward to painting this guy, and I primed him and I noticed that there was a line running right down his face. I don't know what caused it because it's printed like this. So there's no reason for a vertical line to be running down his face, but there was. Yeah, and because it's so detailed, you couldn't really fill that and sand it down without losing a lot of details. So again, like I say, sprayed it with the resin, and fantastic. I'll move on to priming in just a second, but before I do that, I just want to show you a little trick for reinforcing stuff like this. This is actually by Wicked, and it's all pre-supported and it's printed at 100% scale. So this is the size that it's meant to be. These heads and spears is actually solid, and I actually printed the first one, you know, 'cause it's all pre-supported and stuff. I just printed it as it was, and obviously these are like golf balls, so they're just hanging down here. Even after I hollowed them, it's still not very good. You really don't want to be using that on a model, because it's just going to bend over time. So I'm just going to switch these sticks out for actual sticks, spears. And to do that, I'm going to use the Dremel and these grinding tips again. I don't want to cut this with the Dremel, I just want to snip this with, I'm not going to be doing all of these by the way, I'm just going to do one. So I'm just going to snip it at the base. We don't want to bother about that too much. I'm going to snip it at the top. I have to be careful here. Oh, there we go. I want this as flat as I can get it. I'm not sure if these are hollow or not, but I'll find out in just a minute. I'm going to use barbecue skewers for this because I think that they look much more like spears, and neither one of them is perfect, so they've got like natural defects and stuff. So I'm going to keep most of this spike on and measure it. Oh. I'm going to make it to about here. Cut it a little bit longer. I should do. So now I'm going to use this tip to slowly bore into the resin. Okay, we'll zoom this in. So start off slowly. Good job we did this because these spears are hollow, so that means they've got resin sealed inside. Let's check this. There we go. A little bit of force, that'll look lovely. I need to drill a hole in this bottom part as well. There we go. And that looks like a proper spear. And it doesn't dingle dangle. Very nice. Probably do a little bit more up here though. Just a quick. Yeah, there we go. And I'm just going to clip this off here. So I'm just going to bore into this one now just to make sure that this, if this is hollow, we're going to need to empty it out. I don't want it to slip around, that's all. He's going to do it anyway. See, it's already starting to split this one. It's not a big deal, we can repair that. The main thing is it hollow or not? That's actually quite through. So it does feel like there's a bit of a hollow cavity inside here. So what I'm going to do is flush that with some IPA. So if you suspect that you've got resin trapped in a model, this is one way that you can do it. Flush it out and suck it back out. So if there was any resin trapped in there, you just clean it out. So just to wrap things up, I'm going to spray some primer on the lid and see how badly we screwed up. So I'm using zero filler primer. It's basically just normal primer, it's just called filler primer. If you can't buy this, I think I've already said before, buy Mr. Hobby. I definitely don't recommend Villaggio because it can't be sanded and it's just not very good. Just going to turn the extractor on. So I'm actually going to start off with Gollum, just so to go over the modelling paste. See the whole cloud getting sucked into this filter. That's what I wanted to see. None of this big cloud above me. So I'm not 100% happy with Gollum. It's going to take a bigger, much heavier coat. We'll see what happens next. I'm just going to lightly prime that. We're not, like I say, we're not going for coverage. Just looking for defects. That I may have missed. Like there's a support here that I missed. I'm actually pretty impressed so far. I'm just looking at the problem areas. I'm actually quite happy with her. I can probably fix that bit at the bottom with the Aries, which we'll bring in a moment. So I've just quickly gone and got Saruman, or his legs. So I've already given him a quick pre-prime before, which showed up some sticky resin. But just going to give him a quick blast on his legs and stuff. Really moan about, but it is there. So. But yeah, so at this point I would put this down and I would go to the Aries and I would prime it, which we're going to do next. So I just bumped into the camera again. So this is the Aries. It's the Olympus Aries SGA 6206. Probably didn't need that much. This is a 0.7. And set this to 35 psi. Look at that clad go disappearing into the extractor. I'm pretty impressed as how I built this myself. So I had to just move the Martian because I just keep clipping it and I don't want to risk damaging it. I'm just going to come in with some nice heavy strokes. See that paint there? I'm not sure what that is there. We'll find out. Still some things. There's no point in concentrating on anything else if we can't get rid of this roughness here. So. Just going to leave that flat for a bit. can't spray on too much too fast, because if the top layer dries and it's too thick, the gases, the chemicals can't like evaporate through the top layer because it's dried like a film, and the model will never dry. It will dry on the outside, it will look dry, it will feel dry, but as soon as you stick your finger on it, you can leave a fingerprint, or you can dig into it with your fingernail. So while we let this one dry, I'm just going to see what we can do about color, because that's pretty heavy going. That's pretty. This video for a second while it's dry. So while she's been left drying, I did give her a couple of quick coats from up above on on the rough areas. So yeah, we'll see how she looks. I'll take some pictures so you'll see. But yeah, I think she looks really, really good. And the last stage is to go around with a microfiber cloth. So now you have to painstakingly go around all the little nooks and crannies. Just wipe off any bits of like dust or whatever that may have settled. It's a bit rough there, but I think you can hear it. Anywhere that it comes off like that, it means there must have been a little bit of dust there. And it's not a big deal. You can see where I went over that bit here a few more times. It's gone now. There was a little bit of dust or something stuck there as well. So yeah, I'm pretty impressed with the way she's turned out. Let's take a quick look at Gollum. See how rough it sounds there, and then give it a bit of a polish. Something nice and smooth. Yeah, I can no longer see the line running around his neck. It's a good one. Obviously we've worked on a few more models. Well, I've been working on a few more models, but I can't fit them all on the table. But to say that these models was all what I would consider like write-offs, I don't think we've done pretty bad. I mean, like I say, this one was a test print, so I was trying out new settings, so we lowered the exposure time, increased the print speed and stuff like that, which led to some lines and some banding and stuff. So even though I may not have had to completely reprint him, it was either transplant a new head or reprint the entire upper section. And like I say, I probably would have reprinted all of it basically. Lith, again, with the big line running through her face and through her eyes and stuff, I would have considered her a write-off, and I would have just printed another one. Same with Gollum. I don't even know what this guy is. It's from Pan's Labyrinth. I love that film. So yeah, so to say that we would have chucked these away, and some of these prints like this one, you probably would have been chucking away between £10 or £15 worth of resin, with most of the head being solid. If you can afford to do that, that's fine, but if I can save them, I do. So thanks for watching. And if you find any of that useful, please like and subscribe, and I will catch you on the next video. Hopefully there'll be no audio sync problems.